Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we descend into the oldest mountains in North America, the Appalachian Range, where fog clings to ridgelines like something breathing, where hollers swallow sound, and where the forest has watched over secrets far longer than any of us have been alive. These are not the sharp young peaks of the Rockies. These mountains are ancient, worn smooth by time, and they remember everything. The stories you're about to hear come from hunters who never returned the same, campers who stumbled onto ground that should have remained undisturbed, and locals who know better than to speak certain names aloud after dark. They come from handwritten letters, late-night confessions, and testimonies given in whispers at the edges of small-town diners. They are the kind of stories that don't make it into guidebooks, the kind that get passed down with a warning instead of a smile. Out here, the wilderness doesn't just test you, it watches you. And sometimes, it doesn't let you leave. If you're drawn to the kind of truth that lingers in the dark, make sure to subscribe and stay with us tonight. The photo showed my tent, clear as day, taken from maybe 15 feet away, right at the tree line. I was inside that tent when the picture was taken. I know because I checked my phone at 3:47 a.m. that night. The timestamp matched exactly. I was alone on that ridge. No one else for miles. No roads nearby. No trails but the one I'd used to get up there. And yet someone, or something, stood outside my tent in the middle of the night and took a photograph. Then put my camera back on the log where I'd left it. I'm Derek Hamlin. I'm 32, and up until that September, I worked as a wildlife surveyor for the Monongahela National Forest. My job was simple: hike into remote sections, set up motion cameras, document animal populations, check for invasive species, file reports. I'd been doing it for 6 years. I was comfortable in the backcountry. I didn't spook easily. The assignment that week was a high ridge near the Virginia border, a stretch called Panther Run that didn't see much traffic. There'd been reports of black bear activity, possible den sites, and I was tasked with a 3-day solo survey. I'd done 100 trips like it. I packed my gear, drove to the trailhead, and started up the mountain just after noon. The trail was old, barely maintained, but clear enough. Hardwoods crowded close on both sides, the ground soft with years of fallen leaves. It took about 4 hours to reach the ridge, and by the time I set up camp, the light was already going orange through the trees. I pitched my tent in a clearing, maybe 30 yards across, ringed by oaks and pines. There was a stone fire ring someone had built years ago, and a fallen log that made a decent seat. I set my camera on the log while I worked, a digital Canon I used for documenting sites. Standard procedure. I cooked a freeze-dried meal on my camp stove, logged the day's data in my notebook, and settled in as the dark came down. The woods were quiet. No wind, no birds, just that deep, still silence you only get on remote ridges. I liked it. It meant I was far enough out. I read for a while by headlamp, then killed the light and lay back in my sleeping bag around 10. I didn't expect to have trouble sleeping. I never did in the field. But I woke at 3:47 a.m. to the sound of something moving outside the tent. Not an animal. I'd heard plenty of animals. This was different. It was the sound of something large and deliberate, moving slowly around the perimeter of the clearing. Footsteps, but wrong. Too slow, too measured. Like someone was pacing the edge of the camp, stopping every few steps, then continuing. I lay there in the dark, not moving, listening. My headlamp was within reach, but I didn't want to turn it on. Not yet. I wanted to hear. The steps continued, circling, always just outside the clearing, never coming closer, never moving away. And then, after maybe 5 minutes, they stopped. Silence. I waited. My heart was pounding, but I kept my breathing quiet. I stared at the tent wall, trying to see shapes, shadows, anything. But it was too dark. Then I heard it, a soft mechanical click, the shutter sound of a camera. I sat up fast, fumbled for my headlamp, turned it on, and unzipped the tent. I shined the light out into the clearing. Nothing. Just trees. Just the log. Just my camera sitting there. I stayed in the tent doorway, scanning the tree line, listening. Nothing moved. The silence was absolute. I didn't sleep after that. When the sun finally came up, I climbed out and checked the clearing. No footprints. The ground was covered in dry leaves. You'd see a disturbance if something heavy moved through. But there was nothing. I checked my camera. It was exactly where I'd left it. I turned it on, flipped through the photos. The last image I'd taken was of the ridgeline at sunset. But there was one more. A photo of my tent, taken at 3:47 a.m. from the tree line, 15 feet away. I stared at it. The angle was slightly low, like the camera had been held at waist height. The tent was centered in the frame, dimly visible in the faint moonlight that had filtered through the clouds. You could see the outline of my body inside the sleeping bag. You could see the shadow of my head. Someone had picked up my camera, walked to the edge of the clearing, taken a picture of me sleeping, and then walked back and put the camera down. I packed up in under 20 minutes. I didn't file a report. I didn't log the site properly. I just got off that ridge as fast as I could. But the worst part came 3 days later, when I was back in my apartment in Elkins, going through the rest of the photos on the camera. There were 5 more, all taken in the weeks prior, all from other campsites I'd used, all showing my tent at night, all taken from outside, all time-stamped between 3 and 4 a.m. I hadn't noticed. I hadn't checked. I'd been carrying that camera for a month, and something had been visiting me every single night I was in the field, taking a picture and putting the camera back. I showed the photos to my supervisor. He didn't say much. He told me to take a week off. When I came back, my assignments had changed. I wasn't being sent into the backcountry anymore. Just day hikes, local parks, nothing remote. I asked why. He said, "You're not the first." He wouldn't explain. He just said there'd been other surveyors, other reports, things people saw or heard that didn't make it into official files. He said some areas in the Monongahela weren't on the rotation anymore, not because they were dangerous in any normal sense, but because people who went there alone started reporting things that didn't fit. He said the Forest Service had a quiet understanding. Some ridges you don't camp on twice. I asked him what he thought was out there. He looked at me and said, "I think there are things that live in these mountains that we're not supposed to see, and I think some of them are curious." I quit 2 months later, took a job with the state doing road surveys, nothing that required overnight stays, nothing in the deep woods, but I still have the photos. I've studied them. I've zoomed in on every shadow, every corner, every dark space between the trees. I've never seen a figure, never seen a face. Just the tent. Just me inside. Just proof that I was being watched. The official story, if you ask the Forest Service, is that I completed my survey and submitted my findings. That's what the report says. That's what my file shows. But the reality is I ran. I left equipment behind. I broke protocol. And they didn't ask questions because they already knew. I still get emails sometimes from other surveyors, people I worked with. They'll send a message asking if I ever had anything weird happen on Panther Run or near Cranberry Wilderness or up by Dolly Swords. I always say no. I don't want to be the guy who talks about it. I don't want to be the one who makes it real. But late at night, when I'm lying in bed and the house is quiet, I think about those footsteps. I think about how slow they were, how deliberate, like something that had all the time in the world, like something that was in no hurry at all. And I think about the angle of that photo, how low it was, like the camera wasn't being held by hands, like it was being held by something that didn't stand the way we do. I don't hike anymore. I don't camp. I stay out of the woods unless I'm on pavement or in a group. And I never, ever leave a camera out at night. The official explanation, if there is one, is that someone was stalking me. A person, a human being with a grudge or a fascination or a sickness. That's what I told myself for a long time. But people leave footprints. People make noise. People don't visit you every night for a month across dozens of miles of wilderness without being seen once. People don't move through the forest like smoke. I know what I heard. I know what I saw. And I know that whatever took those photos wasn't human. If you've ever woken up in the woods and felt like you were being watched, if you've ever had that cold, creeping certainty that something was standing just outside your tent, just beyond the firelight, waiting, then you already know what I'm talking about. And if you've ever found something on your camera, your phone, your gear that you didn't put there yourself, then you know that the worst part isn't what you see. It's knowing that it saw you first. The ranger station logged it as a standard distress call. 2 hikers overdue on the Greenbrier River Trail, reported by family after they failed to return from a weekend camping trip. What wasn't standard was the voicemail one of them left 3 hours before they were supposed to hike out. It was 11 minutes long. Most of it was silence. But in the last 40 seconds, you could hear a voice in the background. It wasn't either of the hikers. I'm Laura Pritchett, 41, a search and rescue coordinator for Greenbrier County. I've been doing this for 14 years, and I've pulled people out of situations you wouldn't believe. Lost children, injured climbers, elderly hikers with dementia who wandered off trails and kept walking until they couldn't walk anymore. I've seen hypothermia, dehydration, falls, snake bites, bear encounters. I know what panic sounds like. I know what fear sounds like. But the voice on that voicemail wasn't either of those things. The hikers were Claire Ashford, 34, a pharmacist from Charleston, and her partner Ethan Voss, 36, a high school history teacher. They'd been together for 6 years. They weren't thrill seekers or risk takers. They were experienced, cautious hikers who stuck to marked trails and checked weather reports. They'd done the Greenbrier River Trail twice before. It's not a difficult trail. It follows an old railroad bed alongside the river, mostly flat, well-marked, heavily trafficked in summer. In late October, though, it's quieter. Fewer people, longer shadows. They'd planned a 2-night trip, camping at one of the designated sites near the gorge. They checked in with Claire's sister before they left, sent a photo from the trailhead, and said they'd call when they got back to the car Sunday evening. Sunday came and went. No call. By Monday morning, the sister filed a report. We assembled a search team and headed out at first light. Their car was still at the trailhead. Tent, packs, and sleeping bags were gone. We followed the trail south toward the gorge, looking for signs. We found their campsite around noon. It was set up properly. Tent staked, food hung in a bear bag, fire pit cold but recently used. But the tent was open, sleeping bags half pulled out. Claire's phone was on the ground near the entrance, screen cracked. Ethan's pack was still inside. Both their wallets, keys, and identification were there, but no Claire, no Ethan. We searched the area, called their names, checked the riverbank, the surrounding woods, the trail in both directions. We brought in dogs. The dogs tracked their scent down to the river, then lost it. Not upstream, not downstream. Just gone. That night, back at the station, I listened to the voicemail Claire had left. It had come in Sunday at 3:18 p.m., right around the time they should have been packing up. Her sister played it for me on speaker. For the first 9 minutes, there was nothing, just faint rustling, wind maybe, or fabric brushing against the phone. Then Claire's voice, barely audible. We can't find the trail. A pause. Ethan thinks we should follow the river, but it doesn't look right. Another long pause. You could hear breathing, uneven, stressed. There's someone calling us. We keep hearing it, but every time we get close, it moves. Silence again. Then, faint and distant, a voice in the background. It sounded like singing or chanting, rhythmic, low-pitched. I couldn't make out words. Then Claire again, quieter now. It sounds like him. It sounds exactly like him. The recording ended. I played it 4 more times. The background voice was there every time, buried under the wind and static. It didn't sound distressed. It didn't sound human exactly. It sounded like it was calling something. We expanded the search Tuesday, brought in a helicopter, checked both sides of the river for miles. We interviewed other hikers who'd been in the area that weekend. 2 of them mentioned hearing weird sounds near the gorge Saturday night. Voices echoing off the rock walls, but no people. Another hiker said they saw a campfire across the river that didn't make sense because there's no trail access on that side. When they looked again, it was gone. Wednesday, we found Claire. She was 3 miles downstream, sitting on a flat rock in the middle of the river. The water was only knee-deep there, her slow-moving. She was soaking wet, barefoot, wearing the same clothes she'd left in. She wasn't moving, just sitting, staring upstream. When we reached her, she didn't respond, didn't look at us. We wrapped her in blankets, got her to shore, called for an ambulance. She was hypothermic but stable. No injuries, no signs of assault. She hadn't been in the water long, maybe a few hours. In the ambulance, she finally spoke. "He's still there?" I asked who. "Ethan. He's still there. He won't leave." I asked where. She looked at me, and her expression was hollow, empty. "He's not Ethan anymore." She wouldn't say anything else. We kept searching for Ethan. For 5 more days, we combed the gorge, the river, the trails. We used sonar in the deeper pools. We checked caves. We went off-trail into dense brush. Nothing. On day 8, a hunter called in a report. He'd been tracking deer in the ridges above the gorge and found a jacket hanging on a branch. It was Ethan's. The hunter said it looked like it had been placed there deliberately, spread out like someone was marking a spot. We went up, found the jacket. It was clean. No blood, no tears. Just hanging there on a low branch, 10 feet off the trail. Underneath it, pressed into the soft ground, was a single boot print. Ethan's boot. We knew because we'd matched it to prints at the campsite. But it was facing the wrong way, pointing uphill, away from the river, deeper into the woods. We followed the direction. For a 1/4 mile, we found more prints, always spaced far apart, always in soft dirt or mud, always alone, no other tracks, no signs of Claire, no signs of anyone else. Then they stopped. Not at a creek, not at a rock face. They just ended. Middle of the forest floor, thick with leaves. 1 print, then nothing. We widened the search. Brought in cadaver dogs. They didn't hit on anything. Ethan Voss was never found. Claire spent 2 weeks in a psychiatric unit in Charleston. When she was released, she moved in with her sister and refused to talk to anyone about what happened. Her sister eventually told me that Claire barely spoke at all anymore. She'd sit by the window for hours. She wouldn't go outside, and every night she'd wake up around 3 a.m. and say the same thing. "He's calling again." The official report listed Ethan as missing, presumed dead. Likely drowned, body swept downstream, not recovered. It's a clean explanation. It satisfies the paperwork. But I've worked the Greenbrier Gorge for over a decade. I know that river. It's not deep enough or fast enough to take a grown man without leaving trace. And the boot prints don't make sense. Neither does the jacket. Neither does Claire's story. She said they heard someone calling. She said it sounded like Ethan. And when they followed the voice, It led them away from the trail, deeper into the gorge, until they couldn't find their way back. She said the voice would get close, then move. Close, then move. Like it was leading them somewhere. She said that at some point, Ethan started answering it. And then he walked away from her, just turned and walked into the woods, following the voice, and didn't look back. She tried to follow him, but she couldn't keep up. She said the forest got darker, thicker. She said the trees felt wrong, and when she finally stopped and screamed his name, the voice answered her instead. It sounded exactly like Ethan, but Ethan was gone. She ran. She doesn't remember how long. She doesn't remember getting to the river. She just remembers sitting on that rock, staring upstream, waiting for him to come back. She said she could still hear him calling, even when we found her, even in the ambulance. Even now, I don't work that section of the trail anymore. I tell people it's because of staffing, because of budget cuts, because younger rangers have it handled. But the truth is, I can't go back there. Because the last time I was in the gorge, 2 months after Ethan disappeared, I was doing a sweep with another ranger. We were checking campsites, making sure everything was clear before winter. And as we walked past the spot where we found Claire's phone, I heard something. A voice. Distant, echoing off the rock walls. It was calling my name. If you've ever been in the woods and heard your name spoken by a voice you recognize, but you absolutely know that person isn't there, then you understand what I felt. And if you've ever had the urge to follow it, to walk toward it, to see who's calling you even though every rational part of your brain is screaming at you to run, then you know how hard it is to turn around. I didn't follow it. I walked back to the trailhead, got in my truck, and didn't go back. The map didn't show a cabin. Not the USGS quad, not the Forest Service survey, not the GPS data we'd uploaded before the trip. But there it was, sitting in a clearing half a mile off the trail, smoke rising from the chimney. I'm Marcus Delacroix, 29, and at the time I was working as a wilderness guide for a small outfitter based in Asheville. We ran week-long backpacking trips through the Pisgah and Nantahala forests, mostly corporate groups looking to unplug and do some team building in the mountains. It was good work, decent pay. I liked being outside. The group that week was 8 people from a tech startup in Charlotte. Typical clients, fit enough to handle the mileage, inexperienced enough to need guidance. Eager to take photos and talk about how disconnected they felt from modern life while checking their in-reach devices every hour. We were 4 days into a 6-day loop through a remote section of the Nantahala, high ridges and deep valleys, barely any trail traffic. The weather had been perfect, no rain, cool nights, clear skies. Everything was going exactly as planned, until we saw the cabin. We'd stopped for lunch on a ridgeline, and one of the clients, a guy named Trevor Holcomb, said he smelled smoke. Not wildfire smoke, wood smoke. The kind that comes from a stove or a fireplace. I didn't smell it at first, but when the wind shifted, I caught it too. Faint, but definitely there. I checked the map. No structures marked anywhere near us. The nearest maintained trail shelter was 6 miles south. The nearest road was 8 miles west. We were deep in designated wilderness. No permits for cabins, no historical sites, nothing. But Trevor was insistent. He said he could see it through the trees, a roof, a chimney. I looked where he was pointing, downslope, maybe a 1/4 mile through thick hardwoods. And yeah, there was something there. A dark shape, a straight line that didn't belong in the organic chaos of the forest. I told the group to stay put and went down to check it out. The slope was steep, covered in laurel and rhododendron, tough to move through. But after 10 minutes of bushwhacking, I came out into a clearing. There was a cabin. Small, single room, built from hand-hewn logs. Stone chimney on one side, shake roof covered in moss. A single window, shuttered. A plank door. No porch, no path leading to it. Just the cabin. sitting in the middle of the clearing like it had been there 100 years. Smoke was rising from the chimney. I stood there for a long moment, trying to make sense of it. Someone had to be inside. Someone had lit a fire. But who? And how did they get here? Same. There was no road access, no trail, no sign of a vehicle, no ATV tracks, no horse prints. I walked up to the door and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, called out. Hello? Anyone home? Nothing. I tried the door. It opened. The interior was dim, lit only by the fire in the stone hearth. There was a rough wooden table, 2 chairs, a single cot against the far wall. A cast-iron pot hung over the fire, something simmering inside. The smell was strong, meat, onions, herbs, the kind of smell that makes your mouth water. But no one was there. I stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under my boots. The fire was recent. The wood was still crackling, not yet burned down to coals. The pot was hot. I leaned over it and looked inside. Stew, thick, dark, with chunks of meat and root vegetables. I called out again. I'm a wilderness guide. I've got a group nearby. Just want to make sure everything's okay. Still nothing. I checked the cot. A wool blanket, neatly folded. No sleeping bag, no pack, no gear. I checked the corners. No shelves, no storage. Just the basics. Like someone had walked away mid-meal. I went back outside. The clearing was quiet. No birds, no insects, just the faint rustle of wind in the trees. I walked to the perimeter. No footprints, no trash, no wood pile. The chimney was drawing smoke, but there was no stack of firewood anywhere nearby. Nothing to explain where the fuel came from. I went back up to the group and told them what I'd found. Trevor wanted to go down and see it. A couple others did too. I hesitated, but it was early afternoon and we had time. I figured we'd take a quick look, maybe leave a note in case the owner came back, then move on. We hiked down together. I led them into the clearing. The cabin was gone. I'm not talking about burned down or collapsed. I mean gone. The clearing was empty. No cabin, no chimney, no fire. Just trees and underbrush, same as anywhere else in the forest. Trevor looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Where is it? I didn't know what to say. I'd been standing inside it 20 minutes earlier. I'd touched the door. I'd smelled the stew. I'd felt the heat from the fire. We searched the area. We walked the entire clearing, checked the tree line, looked for any sign of a structure. Nothing. No foundation stones, no rotted logs, no nails, no glass, no ash. Just forest floor, soft with leaves and moss. One of the clients, a woman named Angela Park, found something near the center of the clearing. A piece of cloth, dark wool, about the size of a handkerchief. It looked old, frayed edges. She held it up. Was this here before? I didn't know. I didn't remember seeing it. She sniffed it and made a face. Smells like smoke. We packed up and kept moving. No one talked much for the rest of the day. That night, we camped on a ridgeline 4 miles east. I built a fire, cooked dinner, went through the usual evening routine. But the mood was off. People were quiet, uneasy. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of someone moving around outside my tent. I assumed it was one of the clients getting up to pee. I lay there, listening. Footsteps, slow, circling the campsite. Then I heard Trevor's voice. "Marcus, come here." I unzipped the tent and looked out. Trevor was standing at the edge of the firelight, staring into the woods. "What's wrong?" He pointed. "There's a light." I got up, grabbed my headlamp, and walked over. He was pointing downslope into the darkness. I didn't see anything at first. Then I caught it, a faint orange glow, flickering between the trees, like firelight. "Is that a campfire?" I didn't think so. We were in designated wilderness. No one else should have been out here, and the light didn't look like a campfire. It was too steady, too contained. "Stay here," I said. I walked down toward it. 30 yards, 50. The light grew brighter, and then I saw it. The cabin. Same clearing, same chimney, same smoke. I stopped. My chest felt tight. My hands were shaking. I turned around and walked back to camp. Trevor was waiting. "What was it?" I didn't answer. I went into my tent, zipped it shut, and lay there until morning. When the sun came up, I checked downslope. No light, no cabin, nothing. We finished the trip without incident. I filed my post-trip report, got paid, and moved on. I didn't mention the cabin. I didn't know how to explain it. But 3 weeks later, I got a call from another guide in the area. He asked if I'd been near Burning Town Gap recently. I said no. He said he'd had a weird experience on a trip. Clients reported seeing a cabin off trail, but when he went to check it out, it wasn't there. I asked him when. He said 2 days ago. I asked him where. He gave me the coordinates. Same clearing. I quit guiding a month later. Took a job with a state park near Knoxville, doing trail maintenance. Nothing overnight. Nothing off trail. Nothing in the backcountry. But I still think about that cabin. I think about the fire, the stew, the smell, the way the door opened so easily, like it was waiting for me. And I think about what would have happened if I'd stayed inside. The official story is that I saw an old hunting cabin, got disoriented, and couldn't relocate it. That's what I told my boss. That's what I told the clients. That's what I put in the report. But I know what I saw. I know what I smelled. And I know that when I left that clearing and came back with the group, it wasn't just gone. It was erased, like it had never been there at all. If you've ever found something in the woods that shouldn't exist, a structure, a trail, a marker that isn't on any map, and you've had that crawling feeling that you're not supposed to be there, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you've ever had the urge to go inside, to see what's waiting, to step across that threshold even though every instinct is screaming at you to walk away, then you know how close I came. I didn't cross it, but I think about it. And I wonder what I would have found if I'd stayed just a little longer. The drumming started just after midnight. Deep, rhythmic, resonating through the ground like something you feel before you hear. It came from somewhere below the ridgeline, echoing up through the darkness. It didn't stop for 3 hours. I'm Siobhan Mercer, 37, and I was working as a backcountry ranger for the Pisgah-Cherokee National Forest. My job was to patrol high-elevation wilderness, check on campers, enforce regulations, and document trail conditions. I'd been doing it for 9 years. I knew Roan Mountain as well as anyone. Roan is one of the most beautiful places in the southern Appalachians. The high bolds, open, grassy meadows above the tree line, stretch for miles, offering views that pull people from all over. In summer, the rhododendron blooms turn the slopes purple. In fall, the ridges blaze with color. It's a popular spot for backpackers, especially the section that runs along the Appalachian Trail, but in late November, it's quiet. Most campers stay off the high ridges once the weather turns. The wind picks up, the temperatures drop below freezing at night. You can get snow flurries even when the valleys are still green. I was doing a standard patrol loop, a 3-day circuit that covered the northern bolds. I'd camped the first night near Grassy Ridge without incident, and I was heading toward Round Bold when I heard it. Drumming. At first I thought it was thunder, but the sky was clear. No clouds, no lightning, just stars and a faint sliver of moon. I stopped on the trail and listened. It was coming from somewhere downslope off to the west. A steady, deep pulse. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, deliberate, like a ceremonial drum. I checked my watch. 12:14 a.m. I stood there for a long time trying to figure out what I was hearing. It didn't sound recorded. It didn't sound mechanical. It sounded live. Someone was down there, playing a drum. I grabbed my radio and called into the district station. No answer. Not unusual. The high ridges don't get great reception. I tried my satellite communicator. Same issue. I was on my own. I kept walking. The drumming continued. For the next 2 hours, as I made my way along the ridgeline, the sound followed me. Always downslope, always just out of sight. Never getting closer, never fading. Just that steady pulse, rising up through the trees. At 2:47 a.m., it stopped. The silence after was absolute. No wind, no animals. Just the sound of my own breathing. I set up camp in a saddle between two bolds, pitched my tent, and tried to sleep. I didn't manage more than an hour. When I woke, the sun was just starting to light the ridges. I made coffee, packed up, and continued the patrol. The day was uneventful. I checked 2 campsites, documented trail erosion, refilled a backcountry register. By evening, I was camped near Jane Bold, several miles south of where I'd heard the drumming. That night, it started again. Same time. 12:14 a.m. Same sound, same rhythm. But this time, it was closer. I got out of my tent and looked down slope. I could see the forest below, dark and dense. No lights, no fires. Just the drumming, louder now. It sounded like it was maybe a quarter mile away. I grabbed my headlamp and radio and started down the slope. I know it was stupid. I know I should have stayed put, waited for daylight, called for backup. But I needed to know what was making that sound. I needed to see it. I moved carefully, following the sound. The terrain was steep, covered in thick rhododendron. The drumming didn't change. It just kept going. Steady, unwavering. After 15 minutes, I came to a small clearing, open ground surrounded by dense brush. No trees, no rocks, just grass and dirt. The drumming was coming from the center of the clearing. I stopped at the edge and shined my light across the space. There was nothing there. No drum, no person, no speaker, no equipment, but the sound was right there. Right in front of me. So loud I could feel it in my chest. I stepped into the clearing. The drumming didn't change. I walked toward the center. The ground was soft underfoot, slightly damp. I knelt down and touched the dirt. It was vibrating. I pulled my hand back. The vibration was coming from below, deep underground, like something massive was striking the earth from beneath. I stood up and backed away. The drumming continued for another 30 seconds. Then it stopped. The silence was instant. Total. I stood there, breathing hard, staring at the ground. I didn't move for a long time. When I finally turned around and started back up the slope, I heard something behind me. Footsteps. I spun around, shined my light back into the clearing. Nothing. But the footsteps continued. Not in the clearing. Upslope, behind me, following me. I started walking faster. The footsteps matched my pace. I broke into a jog. They stayed with me. I couldn't see anyone, couldn't hear breathing, just footsteps, heavy, deliberate, close. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached my tent. I dove inside, zipped it shut, and sat there with my headlamp off, listening. The footsteps stopped just outside the tent. I could hear something breathing. Slow, deep, rhythmic. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. After what felt like an hour, it walked away. I didn't sleep. I sat in that tent until the sun came up. And then I packed everything as fast as I could and hiked straight back to the trailhead. I didn't finish the patrol. I didn't file a report. I just got in my truck and drove back to the ranger station. My supervisor asked what happened. I told him I felt sick. He didn't push. But a week later, another ranger, a guy named Colin Brewster, told me he'd been up on Roan doing a winter assessment. He said he'd heard drumming at night. He said it sounded like it was coming from underground. He asked if I'd ever heard anything like that. I told him no. He said he'd tried to find the source and couldn't. He said he followed it into the woods and found a clearing. He said the ground was vibrating. He said when he turned to leave, something followed him back to his tent. He said it stood outside for hours, breathing. I asked him what he did. He said he waited until morning, then left. He said he wasn't going back. I put in my resignation 2 weeks later. I told my supervisor I was taking a job with a different Forest Service unit. He didn't ask where, he just signed the paperwork. The official explanation, if you talk to the district office, is that the drumming is a natural phenomenon. Probably seismic activity, low-frequency sound waves traveling through the rock. It's listed as a geological curiosity in some of the ranger notes. Nothing to worry about. But I know what I felt. I know what followed me. And I know that whatever is under that clearing isn't geological. There are old stories about Roan Mountain, Cherokee stories, stories about the balds being sacred, places where the boundary between worlds is thin, places where you don't camp alone, places where you don't follow sounds in the dark. I didn't grow up with those stories. I didn't learn them until after I left, but I believe them now. If you've ever heard drumming in the mountains at night, deep, resonant, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you've ever followed that sound into the dark and felt the ground pulse beneath your feet, then you know what it's like to stand over something that shouldn't be disturbed. I didn't dig. I didn't stay. I left. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. Faint, distant, like it's calling me back. Her name was on the trail register, neat handwriting, date, time, destination. Rachel Tolliver, solo, heading to Shining Rock, back in 3 days. The problem was, Rachel Tolliver had been dead for 8 years. I'm Ben Gaskill, 44, a volunteer search and rescue coordinator for Haywood County. I've been doing this for 12 years, mostly weekends and call-outs when someone goes missing or gets injured in the backcountry. I've worked with the Sheriff's Department, the Park Service, and local emergency responders. I've seen enough lost hikers and bad decisions to know when something doesn't add up. This was one of those times. The call came in on a Saturday morning in early October. A day hiker had found an abandoned campsite near Shining Rock Wilderness, a remote section of the Pisgah National Forest. Tent still standing. Sleeping bag inside, backpack leaning against a tree. No signs of struggle, no signs of the camper. The hiker called it in, worried someone was hurt or lost. We organized a small team and hiked in. The campsite was about 3 miles from the trailhead, just off the main trail in a flat area near a creek. Everything was as the hiker had described. The tent was a cheap 2-person model, staked properly but not zipped shut. The sleeping bag was half out of the tent, like someone had been dragged out in a hurry, or had left in a panic. The backpack contained clothes, a water filter, some snacks, a first aid kit. No ID, no phone, but clipped to the outside of the pack was a laminated card, the kind you use for emergency contact info. It had a name, Rachel Tolliver. No phone number, no address, just the name. I radioed it in. Dispatch ran the name. A few minutes later, they called back. "Ben, we've got a problem." I asked what. "Rachel Tolliver died in 2015, car accident outside Waynesville." I stared at the pack. "You sure?" "Yeah, we pulled the obituary. Same name, same county. She was 26. I told them to double check. Maybe it was a relative, maybe it was a coincidence. They called back 20 minutes later. "No other Rachel Tollivers in the system? Just the one, and she's definitely deceased." We kept searching. We spread out along the creek, checked the ridge lines, called her name. Nothing. No tracks. No blood. No clothing. Just the campsite, sitting there like she'd stepped away for a minute and never came back. That night, back at the staging area, I went through the pack more carefully. The clothes were women's, size small. The gear was old but functional. At the bottom of the pack, wrapped in a plastic bag, I found a journal. I opened it. The first entry was dated September 28th, 2 weeks earlier. First night on the trail. Feels good to be out here again. I forgot how quiet it gets. The handwriting matched the trail register. I flipped through the entries. There were 6 of them, spanning 2 weeks. Short paragraphs. Observations about the weather, the terrain, the wildlife. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained who she was or why her name matched a dead woman. The last entry was dated the day before we found the campsite. Something's wrong with the light here. It doesn't move the way it should. The shadows are too long. I think I need to leave. That was it. I showed the journal to the sheriff's deputy on site. He took photos, logged it as evidence, and told me he'd follow up. I didn't hear anything for a week. Then I got a call from a detective in Waynesville. He asked if I could come in and talk. I drove over the next day. He had a file on his desk, Rachel Tolliver's file. "Tell me what you found," he said. I walked him through it. The campsite, the pack, the journal, the name. He listened, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he slid a photo across the desk. It was a driver's license. Rachel Tolliver, born 1989, died 2015, brown hair, blue eyes, small build. "This is her," he said. "She was killed in a head-on collision on Route 74. Died at the scene. We've got hospital records, autopsy, death certificate. She's buried at Green Hill Cemetery." I looked at the photo. "Then who was camping in Shining Rock?" He didn't answer right away. He pulled out another photo. This one was a photocopy of the trail register I'd seen. "We went out and pulled the register from the trailhead," he said. "This entry was made 3 days before you found the campsite." I looked at the handwriting. Same as the journal, same as the emergency card. "Have you checked the grave?" I asked. He nodded. "Yesterday. Undisturbed. We're not exhuming without cause, but there's no sign of tampering." "Then someone's using her identity?" "Maybe." He leaned back in his chair. "But we ran the fingerprints from the backpack, water bottle, tent poles, journal cover, got a clean set." He slid another paper across the desk. A fingerprint report. They matched Rachel Tolliver, the real Rachel Tolliver, from her driver's license application in 2010. I stared at the report. "That's not possible." "No," he said. "It's not." We sat there in silence. "There's one more thing," he said. He pulled out a photo. It was from a trailhead camera, the kind they use to monitor traffic in high-use areas. The timestamp said October 2nd, 6:47 a.m. The photo showed a woman standing near the trail register. Brown hair, small build, wearing a backpack. She was facing the camera. It was Rachel Tolliver, not someone who looked like her. Not a relative. Her. Same face, same features. Exact match to the driver's license photo. "We've got 3 more photos," he said. "Different times, different trails, all in the last 6 months. Same woman, same face." I didn't know what to say. "We're not releasing this," he said. "No press, no public statements. But I need to know, have you ever seen anything like this before?" I shook my head. He closed the file. "Neither have I." I left the station and drove back home. I couldn't stop thinking about the journal. The last entry? Something's wrong with the light. A week later, I got a call from another SR volunteer. He'd been doing a sweep near Looking Glass Rock and found a campsite. Abandoned. Tent still up. Backpack with a laminated card. The name on the card was Rachel Tolliver. He said he checked the trail register at the trailhead. Same handwriting, same name, date stamp from 4 days earlier. I told him to leave everything in place and call the sheriff. They sent a team out. Same situation. No camper, no tracks, just the site and the journal, with new entries. The last one said, "I don't think I'm supposed to be here, but I don't know where else to go." They've found 4 more campsites since then, all within a 50-mile radius, all the same setup, all the same name. No one's ever seen her, no one's ever found her, just the camps, just the journals, just the name. The official explanation is that someone is hoaxing, using a dead woman's identity for unknown reasons, planting evidence, playing a game. But the fingerprints don't lie. The photos don't lie. I don't do SAR work in that area anymore. I've moved to a different region. I tell people it's because I'm getting older, that I want easier terrain. But the truth is, I can't go back. Because the last time I was out there, checking a report near Cold Mountain, I found a trail register. And I flipped through it. There was an entry from the day before. Rachel Tolliver, solo, heading to Shining Rock, back in 3 days. I looked up from the register. The trail ahead was empty, quiet. The light was fading. And for just a second, I thought I saw someone standing at the tree line, watching me. Small build, brown hair, backpack. I blinked. She was gone. If you've ever found something in the woods that belongs to someone who shouldn't exist, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you've ever had that feeling, that cold, creeping certainty, that the person you're searching for is still out there, still moving, still camping, still writing in a journal even though they've been dead for years, then you know what it's like to realize that some people don't leave the mountains, even when they die. The climber's rope was still anchored to the rock, tied off properly, weighted, hanging over the edge into the gorge. But the climber was at the bottom, 150 feet down, and the rope hadn't snapped, it had been cut. I'm Dalton Yarbrough, 36, a paramedic and technical rescue specialist based out of Burke County. I've been working high-angle rescues for 11 years, mostly in Linville Gorge, one of the deepest and most rugged canyons in the eastern United States. The walls are steep, the rock is unstable, and people die there every year. Falls, exposure, bad decisions. It's beautiful, and it's unforgiving. The call came in on a Sunday afternoon in late April. A climber had fallen near the Sitting Bear area, a popular climbing zone on the East Rim. Witnesses said he'd been rappelling and lost control. They'd called 911, but by the time we got there, he'd been down for over an hour. We assembled the team, loaded the gear, and hiked to the top of the cliff. The anchor was still set. I clipped in, checked the rigging, and leaned over the edge. I could see him. He was crumpled on a ledge about 20 feet above the canyon floor, not moving. I rappelled down. He was dead. Mid-30s, male, wearing a harness and helmet. His neck was bent at an angle that told me everything I needed to know, but his gear looked fine. No frayed webbing, no broken carabiners. His harness was intact. I checked the rope. It was still attached to his harness. I followed it up with my eyes, tracing the line back to the anchor. It was cut, not frayed, not worn through. Cut. A clean slice, about 6 feet above where he'd tied in. The kind of cut you'd make with a knife. I radioed up to the team. "We've got a problem." They sent down another rescuer. We packaged the body, hauled it up, and got it to the staging area. The sheriff's deputy took one look at the rope and called for detectives. The victim's name was Jordan Kemper. He was 32, an experienced climber from Boone. He'd been climbing in Linville for years. He wasn't a beginner. He wasn't reckless. And according to the 2 witnesses who'd been with him, he'd been alone on the wall when he fell. The detectives interviewed them separately. Both told the same story. Jordan had been setting up a rappel from the top of the cliff. They'd been resting about 50 feet away, taking a water break. They heard him shout, not a scream, just a short, surprised yell, and then he was gone. They ran over. The rope was hanging over the edge. They looked down and saw him on the ledge. They didn't see anyone else. They didn't hear anyone else. Just Jordan, setting up his gear, and then falling. One of them said something that stuck with me. It looked like he was trying to grab the rope, like he was reaching for it, but it was too far away. I asked what she meant. She said, when he fell, the rope was swinging, like someone had pushed it, but no one was there. The detectives treated it as a suspicious death. They investigated Jordan's life, his relationships, his finances. They checked for enemies. They checked for motive. They found nothing. Jordan was well liked. No debts, no drama, no reason for anyone to want him dead. They ruled it accidental. They said the rope must have been damaged before the climb, maybe from a previous rappel or a sharp edge. They said the cut was likely from abrasion, not a blade. But I've been working with rope for over a decade. I know what abrasion looks like. I know what a knife cut looks like. That rope was cut. 3 weeks later, I got another call. Different location, same gorge. A hiker had fallen near Table Rock. Not a climbing accident, just a fall from the trail. But the circumstances were strange. The hiker, a woman named Emily Brennan, had been with a group. They'd stopped at an overlook to take photos. Emily had been standing near the edge, taking a picture of the canyon, when she suddenly stepped backward, away from the edge, towards safety, and then stumbled forward and went over. Her friends said it looked like she'd been pushed, but no one had touched her. She fell 60 feet and died on impact. When I got there to assist with the recovery, I talked to her friends. They were shaken. One of them, a man named Isaiah Trask, kept saying the same thing. She was moving away from the edge. She was being careful, and then something just shoved her. I asked if he saw anyone. He said no, but he said he felt something. A coldness, a pressure, like something moved past him, fast, and hit Emily. I didn't know what to say. We recovered the body. The medical examiner ruled it accidental. Blunt force trauma consistent with a fall. But Isaiah told me something else before he left. He said that right before Emily fell, he'd heard a sound, a low, guttural sound, like something breathing. He said it came from behind them, from the trail, but when he turned around, no one was there. I started asking around, talking to other rescue workers, other climbers, other rangers who worked the gorge. I wanted to know if anyone else had seen or heard anything unusual. Most people brushed it off. But a few didn't. A ranger named Kimberly Cho told me she'd been patrolling the rim trail near Hawksbill a few months earlier and had found a length of climbing rope lying on the ground. It had been cut. Clean slice. She'd bagged it, thinking someone had left trash, but when she got back to the station and looked at it closer, she realized it was still attached to an anchor, an old piton driven into the rock decades ago. She said it looked like someone had been hanging from it mid-climb and the rope had been cut while they were on it. She said she'd never found a body. She'd filed a report, but no one followed up. Another climber, a guy named Oscar Benitez, told me he'd been climbing near Babel Tower the previous summer when he'd felt his rope jerk. Hard. Like someone had grabbed it and pulled. He'd been 40 feet up, setting protection. He looked down, expecting to see his belayer messing around, but his belayer was standing still, holding the rope slack. Oscar said it happened 3 more times. Each time he felt a sharp tug, like something was testing the line. He'd bailed on the route and hadn't been back since. I started keeping a file. Unofficial. Just notes. Dates, locations, incidents, anything that seemed off. Over the next 6 months, I logged 9 events. Ropes cut, people falling, gear failing in ways that didn't make sense, witnesses reporting cold spots, strange sounds, the feeling of being watched or followed. 2 more people died. The official reports said accidents, rockfall, equipment failure, human error. But the patterns were there, always in Linville Gorge, always near the cliffs, always involving people who were alone or separated from their group. And always, someone said they'd heard something, felt something, seen something move just out of sight. I stopped working rescues in the gorge last year. I told my supervisor I needed a break. He understood. Burnout is common in this line of work, but the truth is I can't go back. Because the last time I was there, recovering a body near Short-Off Mountain, I was rappelling down the cliff face and I felt my rope jerk. Hard. I looked up. My anchor was solid. My B-layer was at the top, managing the line properly. No reason for the rope to move, but it jerked again and again, like something was pulling on it. I looked down. I was 80 feet above the canyon floor. Below me, in the shadows, I saw movement. Something large, something that didn't move like an animal. It was climbing. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't using hands. It wasn't using gear. It was just moving up the rock face, fast, fluid, wrong. I yelled to my B-layer. He hauled me up. I got to the top, unclipped, and backed away from the edge. I didn't look down again. The official story is that Linville Gorge is dangerous because of the terrain. Loose rock, steep drops, unpredictable weather. All true. But I've worked enough rescues to know when something doesn't fit. And I know what I saw. There's something in that gorge. Something that doesn't want people on the cliffs. Something that cuts ropes, that pushes hikers, that climbs rock faces like gravity doesn't exist. If you've ever been climbing and felt your rope move when it shouldn't, or if you've ever stood at the edge of a cliff and felt a sudden, unexplainable urge to step forward, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you've ever looked down into a canyon and seen something moving in the shadows, something that shouldn't be there, something that shouldn't be able to move the way it does, then you know why I don't go back. The GPS said we'd hiked 12 miles, but the trailhead was right in front of us. Same parking lot, same sign, same car. We'd been walking in a straight line for 6 hours. I'm Cassandra Vale, 28, a biology graduate student from Chapel Hill. I was doing field research in the Great Smoky Mountains, studying salamander populations in high-elevation streams. It was solo work, mostly. Long days hiking to remote creeks, collecting samples, logging data. I'd been doing it for 2 summers. I knew the trails, or I thought I did. The route I'd planned was straightforward. A 10-mile out and back along the Hazel Creek Trail, one of the quieter paths on the North Carolina side of the park. I'd done it twice before without issue. The trailhead was at the end of a gravel road about an hour from the nearest town. No cell service. No other cars in the lot when I arrived. I started hiking at 7 a.m. The weather was perfect. Clear, cool, a light breeze moving through the trees. I made good time. By 10 a.m., I was 3 miles in, checking my first sample site. Everything was normal. I continued up the trail. At mile 5, I stopped for lunch. I checked my GPS. I was right on track. The trail ahead was marked clearly, the path wide and easy to follow. I kept going. At mile 6, I noticed something strange. The trail looked familiar, not in the way that all forest trails look similar. I mean identical. Same fallen log across the path, same boulder next to a creek crossing, same cairn marking a side trail. I stopped and checked my GPS. It showed me still heading west, deeper into the wilderness. But the landmarks around me looked like the ones I'd passed hours ago. I kept walking. At mile 7, I saw the boulder again. Same one, same position, same lichens on the surface. I checked my GPS. It still showed forward progress. No loops, no turns. Just a straight line west. But I was sure I'd seen that boulder before. I marked it with a piece of orange flagging tape I carried for sample sites, tied it around a branch next to the boulder. I took a photo, then I kept going. At mile 8, I saw the flagging tape. Same boulder, same tape, same branch. I stopped. My heart was pounding. I looked at my GPS. It showed me 2 miles past where I'd tied the tape, but I was standing right next to it. I turned around and started walking back. I didn't run. I didn't panic. I just walked, quickly, following the trail downhill. I passed the creek crossing. I passed the cairn. I passed the fallen log. I walked for an hour, and then I saw the boulder again, with my flagging tape. I checked my GPS. It showed me 4 miles from the trailhead, almost back. But I was standing next to the same boulder I'd marked 3 hours ago. I sat down. I forced myself to breathe. I tried to think logically. I checked my compass. It pointed north, same as always. I checked my map. The trail was straightforward. No loops, no intersections, just a single path running east-west. I looked at the flagging tape. I'd tied it myself, I was sure. I pulled out my phone. No signal. I opened my GPS app. The blue dot showed me miles away from the boulder, but I was right next to it. I stood up and started walking again. This time, I didn't follow the trail. I went off path, straight downhill, bushwhacking through the undergrowth. I wanted to get to the valley floor, find the creek, follow it back to the road. I hiked for 2 hours. The terrain was rough, slow going, but I kept moving downhill. Eventually, I heard water. I came out onto the trail, same creek crossing, same cairn, same boulder, same flagging tape. I started running. I don't know how long I ran. I didn't stop to check the GPS. I didn't stop to think. I just ran, following the trail, convinced that if I moved fast enough, I'd break out of whatever was happening. I ran until I couldn't breathe. Then I stopped and bent over, gasping. When I looked up, I saw the trailhead. Same parking lot, same sign, same car. I walked over to it. My car. I checked the license plate. Same number. I checked the interior. My bag was in the back seat. My jacket was on the passenger seat. Everything exactly where I'd left it. I checked my GPS. It showed I'd hiked 12 miles, but I was back at the start. I got in the car. I didn't pack my gear. I didn't take samples. I just started the engine and drove. I didn't stop until I was back in Chapel Hill. The next day, I called the Park Service. I explained what happened. The ranger I spoke to was polite but skeptical. He said it sounded like I'd gotten disoriented, maybe dehydrated, maybe suffering from heat exhaustion. He said the Hazel Creek Trail doesn't loop. He said I must have taken a side trail without realizing it. I told him I marked the route. I told him about the boulder, the flagging tape, the GPS. He said he'd file a report. He never called me back. I went online and searched for similar stories. I found 3. A hiker in the Smokies who said he'd walked the same section of trail for 8 hours before realizing he was looping. A backpacker in Shenandoah who swore she'd passed the same campsite 4 times in one day, even though her GPS showed linear progress. A trail runner in the Nantahala who said he'd run 15 miles and ended up back at his car after 2 hours. None of them had explanations. None of them went back. I dropped out of my research program a month later. I told my advisor I was switching focus, moving to a different field site. I didn't tell him why, but I kept the flagging tape. I still have it. Orange, weathered, the same piece I tied to that branch. And 6 months later, I got an email from another grad student. She was working in the Smokies, doing stream surveys. She asked if I'd ever had any weird experiences on the Hazel Creek Trail. I asked why. She said she'd found a piece of orange flagging tape tied to a branch next to a boulder at mile 6. She said it looked old. She said she'd marked it with her own tape and kept hiking. She said she passed it 3 more times. The official story is that I got disoriented, that the trail confused me, that I looped back without realizing it. But I know what I saw, I know what I did, and I know that the trail I walked that day doesn't exist on any map. If you've ever hiked the same trail and felt like it was longer than it should be, or if you've ever passed the same landmark twice and convinced yourself you were mistaken, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you've ever checked your GPS and seen yourself moving forward while everything around you stayed the same, then you know what it's like to realize that some trails don't lead anywhere. They just keep you walking. The structure was visible from the observation tower, a long, low building with a flat roof, sitting in a clearing about half a mile down the ridgeline. It looked like a mid-century institutional building. Gray concrete, rows of narrow windows. It didn't belong there. I'm Felix Navarro, 33, a maintenance technician for the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. My job involves keeping facilities operational: restrooms, water systems, observation platforms, visitor centers. I'd been working the Clingman's Dome area for 4 years. I knew every structure, every utility line, every access road. There was no building on that ridgeline. I was doing a routine inspection of the observation tower on a cold November morning. The tower sits at the highest point in the Smokies, 6,643 feet. On a clear day, you can see 100 miles. That morning, the visibility was good. The sky was overcast, but the air was sharp and clean. I was checking the ramp railings when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow, a cloud formation. But the more I looked, the more solid it became. A building, rectangular, maybe 100 feet long, sitting in a clearing surrounded by spruce trees. I grabbed my binoculars. Through the lenses, it was unmistakable. Concrete walls, small windows, some with glass, some empty, a door on one end. No smoke, no lights, no movement. I radioed back to the district office. "Hey, do we have any old structures on the ridge west of Clingman's? Maybe something from the 60s or 70s. The dispatcher said no. Nothing out there but forest. I told her what I was seeing. She said she'd check the archives and get back to me. I waited. 10 minutes later, she called back. "There's no structure listed on that ridge. Are you sure you're seeing something?" I was sure. She said she'd send someone up to take a look. I told her I'd hike out and check it myself. I left the tower and followed the ridgeline west. The terrain was rough, dense spruce, rocky ground, no trail. I used the building as a landmark, keeping it in sight through the trees. After 20 minutes, I came to the clearing. The building was gone. I stood in the clearing, turning in a circle. There was nothing. No foundation, no debris, no sign that anything had ever been there. Just trees, rocks, and moss. I checked my GPS. I was in the right place. The coordinates matched. I walked the perimeter of the clearing. No disturbance, no tracks. No cuts in the trees where a structure would have blocked sunlight. I radioed the dispatcher. "I'm at the site. There's nothing here." She asked if I wanted someone else to come out. I said no. I said I must have been seeing things. Trick of the light. But I didn't believe that. I hiked back to the tower. When I got there, I looked west again. The building was there. Same spot. Same shape. Clear as day. I grabbed my camera and took photos. I zoomed in as far as I could. Through the lens, I could see details. Rust stains under the windows. Cracks in the concrete. A metal door, slightly ajar. I took a dozen photos. Then I packed up my gear and drove back to the district office. I showed the photos to my supervisor. He looked at them for a long time. "Where did you take these?" I told him. He zoomed in on one of the images. "This looks like an old hospital or a sanatorium." I asked if the park had ever operated anything like that. He said no, but he said there were old CCC structures in the park, some of them decommissioned and overgrown. He said he'd look into it. 2 days later, he called me into his office. "I found something," he said. He showed me a black and white photograph. It was dated 1957. It showed a building, long, flat roof, narrow windows, identical to the one I'd seen. The caption read, "Klingman's Sanatorium, elevation 6400 FT, demolished 1963. I stared at the photo. It was a tuberculosis hospital, he said, back when they thought high-altitude air helped with treatment. They built it in the late 30s, ran it until the early 60s, then tore it down when antibiotics made it obsolete. I asked where it had been located. He pulled out a map and pointed. "Right here, same ridge you were on." I looked at the map. Same coordinates. "It was demolished," I said. "Yeah. Then what did I see?" He didn't answer. I went back up the next day. Same time, same weather. I went to the tower, looked west, and scanned the ridgeline. Nothing. I hiked out to the clearing. Still nothing. But when I got back to the tower and looked again, it was there. I went back a dozen times over the next month. Some days I saw it. Some days I didn't. There was no pattern, no consistency. It was just there. Sometimes like a photograph projected onto the landscape. Other park employees started noticing it too. A ranger named Ingrid Stoltz told me she'd seen it from the parking area. A trail crew worker named Remy Baptiste said he'd spotted it while clearing brush on the access road. Both of them said the same thing. It looked real, but when they tried to reach it, it was gone. I started researching the sanatorium. I found records in the park archives, patient logs, staff rosters, incident reports. 37 people died there. Most from tuberculosis, a few from complications, one from a fall, 2 from exposure after wandering away from the building during a winter storm. There was a note in one of the incident reports that stood out. Patients frequently report seeing staff members in areas of the building that are unoccupied. Security checks reveal no personnel present. Incidents attributed to fever and delirium. I kept reading. Multiple patients have claimed to hear voices in the lower hall, particularly at night. Voices described as calling or beckoning. No source identified. The sanatorium was demolished in 1963. The building was dismantled. The materials were hauled away. The site was cleared and replanted. Nothing was left, but I've seen it. I've photographed it. I've stood in the clearing where it used to be and felt the air turn cold, felt the pressure change, felt the wrongness of the space. The official explanation is that I saw a mirage, a temperature inversion, light bending around the ridge, projecting an image of something that used to be there. But mirages don't appear on photographs. Mirages don't have rust stains and open doors. I don't work Klingman's Dome anymore. I requested a transfer. My supervisor approved it without asking why. But I still think about it. I think about the patients who died there. I think about the voices they heard. I think about what it must have been like to be sick, isolated, 6,000 feet above the world, surrounded by mountains that don't care whether you live or die. And I think about the last photo I took, the one I didn't show anyone. It's a close-up of the doorway, zoomed in as far as my camera would go. You can see inside, you can see a hallway, and at the far end, you can see a figure, standing, facing the camera. I don't know who it is. I don't know if it's a patient, a staff member, or something else, but I know it's looking at me. If you've ever seen a building that shouldn't exist, or if you've ever looked at a place and felt like you were seeing 2 versions of it at once, one real, one not, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you've ever taken a photo of something that wasn't there when you looked with your own eyes, then you know what it's like to realize that some places don't disappear. They just stop letting you in. She was standing in the middle of the meadow, barefoot, wearing a white dress. It was 30 degrees outside. She didn't move. She didn't react when I called to her. She just stood there, facing away, her hair moving slightly in the wind. I'm Nolan Thatcher, 47, a wilderness guide and survival instructor based in Asheville. I've been leading trips in the southern Appalachians for over 20 years. Backpacking, primitive skills, winter camping. I've worked with corporate groups, scout troops, military veterans. I've taught people how to start fires without matches, build shelters from natural materials, navigate by stars. I know these mountains as well as anyone, but I'd never seen anything like this. It was late January. I was leading a winter skills course in the Roan Highlands, a stretch of high-elevation bolds along the Tennessee-North Carolina border. We had a group of 6 clients, all experienced hikers, all prepared for cold weather camping. The forecast was clear, but temperatures were expected to drop into the teens overnight. We'd camped on Round Bald the first night and were moving toward Jane Bald the next day. The route took us across open meadows, exposed ridgelines, and stands of wind-sculpted trees. The landscape was stark and beautiful. Frozen grass, gray skies, distant ridges fading into mist. Around midday, we stopped for lunch on a broad meadow. We were above 5,000 feet, the wind steady and cold. I was going over navigation techniques with the group when one of the clients, a woman named Bryn McLeod, pointed across the meadow. "Is that someone out there?" I looked. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I caught it. A figure, maybe 200 yards away, standing alone in the open. I raised my binoculars. It was a girl, maybe 10 or 12 years old, barefoot, wearing what looked like a white cotton dress, thin and sleeveless. Her hair was long, dark, hanging loose. She was facing away from us, standing perfectly still. I lowered the binoculars and looked at the group. "Anyone else see that?" They all nodded. I called out, "Hey, are you okay?" No response. I started walking toward her. The group followed. We covered half the distance, 100 yards, and I called again. "Do you need help?" She didn't turn, didn't move. I picked up my pace. When I was 50 yards away, I stopped. She was still standing there. But something was wrong. Her posture was too rigid, her stillness too complete. No shifting weight, no fidgeting, no breath visible in the cold air. I called again. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. I walked closer. 30 yards. 20. And then she turned. Not slowly, not like a person turning to look at something. She pivoted all at once, like a mannequin on a turntable. She was facing me now, but I couldn't see her face. Not because it was blurred or shadowed. I couldn't focus on it. Every time I tried to look directly at her, my eyes would slide away, like trying to stare at the sun. I could see her dress. I could see her hair. I could see her hands, pale and hanging at her sides. But not her face. I stopped. My chest felt tight. My hands were shaking. Bryn came up beside me. "What's wrong with her?" I didn't answer. The girl started walking toward us. Not fast, not slow, just a steady, even pace. Her feet made no sound on the frozen grass. I backed up. "We need to leave." "What? Now?" I turned and started walking back toward the group. Bryn hesitated, then followed. We reached the others, and I told them to pack up. No explanations, no debate, just pack and move. We hiked fast. I kept looking back. The girl was following, always the same distance behind. Never faster, never slower, just walking. Her white dress stood out against the gray landscape like a beacon. We put 2 miles between us and the meadow before I stopped. I looked back. She was still there. One of the clients, a man named Hugh Ferris, asked what was happening. I didn't know how to explain it. I just said, "We need to get off the ridge." We descended into the tree line, following a steep trail down toward a forest road. The terrain was rough, and the group was starting to panic. I kept them moving. When we reached the road, I looked back one last time. The girl was standing at the edge of the trees, not moving, just watching. I got the group into the van and drove back to Asheville. No one spoke. I filed a report with the Park Service describing what we'd seen. They sent a ranger out the next day to check the area. He didn't find anything, no footprints, no signs of a child, no tracks in the frozen grass. But 2 weeks later, I got a call from another guide, a guy named Thomas Rivera. He'd been leading a group on the same section of the Roan Highlands and had seen a girl in a white dress standing in a meadow. He said she didn't move. He said when he got close, she turned to face him, and he couldn't see her face. He said she followed them for 3 miles. I started asking around, quietly, other guides, rangers, locals who'd lived near the Balds for decades. 3 more people had seen her, always in winter, always on the Balds, always alone. One of them, an old man named Abner Early, told me a story. He said that back in the 1940s, a family had been hiking the Balds in winter. A father, a mother, and a young daughter. They'd gotten caught in a storm. The father tried to lead them down to shelter, but they got disoriented. The daughter wandered away from the group. By the time they found her, 3 days later, she'd frozen to death in a meadow. He said people had been seeing her ever since. Always in winter, always in the same white dress, always barefoot. He said she didn't mean any harm. She was just lost. But he also said that people who followed her never came back the same. I stopped guiding trips on the Roan Highlands after that. I tell clients I'm focusing on lower elevations, that the high Balds are too exposed, too risky in winter. But the truth is, I can't go back. Because the last time I was up there, 3 months after that trip, I was doing a solo scout for a new route. I was alone. It was late afternoon. I was crossing a meadow near Grassy Ridge when I saw her. Same dress, same stillness, same impossible face. And this time, she was closer, 50 feet away. I didn't run. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at her, trying to see her face. And then I heard a voice. Soft, thin, like wind through grass. "Come with me." I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached my truck. The official story is that people see what they want to see, that the mind fills in gaps, that isolation and cold create hallucinations. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard, and I know that the girl on the Balds isn't a ghost. She's something else. Something that's been there longer than the trails, longer than the stories. Something that stands in the meadows and waits. If you've ever been hiking in winter and seen someone who didn't belong, or if you've ever felt the urge to follow a figure in the distance even though you know you shouldn't, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you've ever heard a voice in the wind calling your name and you've turned to answer, then you know how close you came to never coming back. The entrance was supposed to be sealed. The maps showed it collapsed in 1974, but the gate was open, the chain cut, and the air coming out of the shaft smelled like sulfur and wet stone. I'm Imogen Rutledge, 31, a geologist working with the Tennessee Division of Geology. My job involves surveying abandoned mines, assessing collapse risks, and documenting hazardous sites. I'd been doing it for 7 years, mostly in the Cumberland Plateau region, where old coal mines honeycomb the mountains. Frozen Head State Park sits in Morgan County, a rugged stretch of wilderness known for steep ridges, deep gorges, and a history of coal extraction. Most of the mines were closed by the 1970s, their entrances sealed or collapsed. A few remain accessible, monitored by the state for safety. I was assigned to survey an old drift mine on the north slope of Frozen Head Mountain. The records indicated it had been abandoned in 1968 and sealed 6 years later. No incidents, no fatalities. just a played-out seam, uneconomical to work. My job was to confirm the seal was intact and log the site for future monitoring. I hiked in on a cold March morning. The trail was overgrown, barely visible, but the GPS coordinates were accurate. After 2 miles, I found the site. The gate was open, not broken, not rusted through. The chain had been cut. Clean. Recent. I radioed back to the office. Gate's been compromised. Looks like someone's been inside. My supervisor, a man named Preston Mabry, told me to document it and withdraw. He said he'd send a team to reseal it, but I was already there. I had my gear. And I wanted to see how far in the mine went. I entered the shaft. The tunnel was narrow, about 6 feet high and 8 feet wide, carved straight into the mountain. The walls were damp, the floor covered in a thin layer of silt and coal dust. The air was cold and heavy, hard to breathe. I moved slowly, checking the ceiling for instability. The mine looked stable, but old. Wooden support beams in some sections, rusted rail tracks running down the center. My headlamp beam cut through the darkness, reflecting off pools of standing water. After 100 feet, the tunnel split, left and right. No signs, no markers. I took the left branch. The passage narrowed. The ceiling dropped. I had to crouch in places, my pack scraping against the rock. The air grew colder. The smell of sulfur intensified. After another 50 feet, I came to a chamber. It was larger than I expected. Maybe 30 feet across, with a high ceiling that disappeared into shadow. The walls were smooth, hand-carved, with veins of coal still visible. In the center of the chamber was a vertical shaft, maybe 10 feet wide, dropping straight down. I approached the edge and shined my light down. I couldn't see the bottom. I dropped a rock. I listened. Silence. No impact. No echo. Just silence. I backed away from the shaft and swept my light around the chamber. On the far wall I saw markings. Not graffiti, not recent. These were old. Carved into the coal, symbols, lines, patterns I didn't recognize. I took photos. I documented the layout. I checked my air monitor. CO levels were rising. Not dangerous yet, but enough to be cautious. I decided to head back. But when I turned toward the tunnel, I saw something. Footprints. Fresh. Leading from the tunnel into the chamber. Not mine. I'd been careful, staying to the side to avoid disturbing the floor. These prints came from the tunnel I'd just walked through. They stopped at the edge of the shaft. I swept my light across the chamber. No one else was there. I called out, "Hello?" My voice echoed. No response. I walked back toward the tunnel. The footprints were clear, boot prints size 10 or 11, leading in, not leading out. I followed them back through the passage. They continued all the way to the entrance, and then they stopped, right at the gate. I stepped outside. The forest was quiet. No one around, no vehicles on the trail. I radioed Preston. "I've got footprints in the mine. Fresh. Someone's been inside recently." He told me to leave immediately. He said he'd contact law enforcement. I packed up and hiked out. But as I walked, I kept looking back. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. When I got back to the office, I reviewed my photos. The markings on the wall were strange. I sent them to a colleague who specialized in historical mining practices. She called me the next day. "Where did you find these?" I told her. "These aren't mining marks," she said. "They're older. Much older." I asked what she meant. I'd have to see them in person to be sure, but they look like pre-Columbian symbols. Native American, possibly Cherokee. I stared at the photos. Why would they be in a coal mine? "They wouldn't," she said. "The mine must have intersected something that was already there." I asked what. "A sacred site. Maybe a burial chamber, maybe something else." I contacted the state archaeologist. He reviewed the photos and agreed. He said the symbols indicated ceremonial use, possibly tied to burial practices or spiritual rituals. He said he'd coordinate with the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians and schedule a site visit. But before that could happen, the mine collapsed. A trail runner reported hearing a rumble near the north slope of Frozen Head. Rangers investigated and found the entrance buried under several tons of rock and soil. The entire hillside had shifted. No one was inside. No injuries. Just a natural collapse, according to the geologists who assessed it. But I know better, because the night before the collapse, I got a call. Unknown number. I answered. There was no voice, just breathing. Slow, deep. Behind it, faint but unmistakable, I heard drumming. I hung up. The call came again an hour later. Same thing, breathing, drumming. I blocked the number, but I still hear it sometimes. Late at night when the house is quiet, a faint pulse, a rhythm, like something deep underground, still moving, still calling. The official story is that the mine was unstable, that the collapse was inevitable, that no one should have been inside. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know that the symbols on that wall weren't just carvings. They were warnings. If you've ever been in a place that felt wrong, a cave, a tunnel, a basement, somewhere deep and dark where the air tastes old and the silence feels too heavy, then you know what I'm talking about. And if you've ever heard something in that silence, something that doesn't belong, then you know why I don't go underground anymore. Some places are sealed for a reason, and some of them should stay that way.